Are we mere reproducing machines? Response to BlitheringGenius. Introduction. I will be responding to and commenting on 2 videos by BlitheringGenius, where he tries to argue that reproduction is the only source of value and that those who do not reproduce are losers. While such arguments are not novel, BlitheringGenius presents them in considerable detail, warranting a response. I do not believe in any meaning of life or the purpose of our existence or anything like that. I do not believe in free will, souls, other planes of existence, etc. I do not believe that morality exists independently of the doings of rational agents. Additionally, I do not believe in a single conception of who or what we are. So, I am immune to most, if not all, attacks of BG that he directs at the opponents in the 2 videos I'm commenting on. However, he explicitly attacks pessimists. Now I feel called out. Summary of BG's argument. First, BG wants to make the case that the purpose of life is reproduction, and everything that does not serve reproduction or leads us away from reproducing is a mistake. All desires and emotions serve the purpose of reproduction, he says, because it's the basis of natural selection. Reproduction is our natural purpose. Reproduction is the only source of value in the universe. We are reproducing machines. According to him, only reproduction creates value because it's a process where the effect, the organism, creates new entities that act as causes that make the same effects. Their offspring will also reproduce. Value is that cyclical process. If our emotions hinder our reproduction, then they are wrong. We engage in various behaviors that make us feel good, but they don't make us reproduce. Such fake actions are mistakes. We delude ourselves about the values of said actions. We can choose not to reproduce and do some other things, like protected sex or having a cat, but we're still acting out our reproductive motives. We're performing acts but without getting the real effect, which is having children. Those who reproduce are successful. Those who do not reproduce are failures. After that, BG wants to attack the pessimist who casts a negative value on life, existence, the world, and reproduction. He says that the pessimist is also just a mere reproducing machine and he's being motivated by the very desires he rejects. The pessimist imagined some ideals with respect to which he judges the world as bad. But these ideals are delusions, desires programmed into us to make us reproduce. All of our ideals and virtues are means for reproduction. All of that philosophizing about the world being bad is just the brain trying to get status in the society, to get recognition, to get resources, and ultimately to reproduce. BG suggests that instead of deluding ourselves with ideals, we should just accept the truth. We are reproducing machines, and there is no escaping this condition. Instead of pretending not to be reproducing machines and living a lie, lamenting what we are, we can become successful at what we really are. This way, we would live more honest and fulfilling lives. Critique. I'll now provide the proper critique of the argument that we're all merely reproducing machines. The criticisms are independent, so it doesn't matter much if you find one of them unconvincing. The ground for the discussion. We all have to take for granted that we are rational beings. That is, we are capable of rational thought. It doesn't mean that we're perfectly rational, only that we are capable of rational thought. We can learn certain things about the world. We can make conclusions. We can make evaluations. BG cannot simply say that all our mental faculties are in the service of reproduction. irrespective of the truth. That is, he cannot claim that we are not rational. That would undermine his own argumentation, since it would not be rational on his grounds. His argument would not be rational, with no pretense to truth, and so it would fall as it wouldn't stand on any ground whatsoever. So, while we can believe in us being reproducing machines, he has to admit that what he's saying is reasonable and rational because we are capable of rational thinking and making true claims. So, we're not mere reproducing machines, because we're at least beings capable of rational thinking. Is BG a loser by his own standards? If reproduction is the standard by which we measure success, then by BG's own ideology, he is not winning. The winners would be men like Genghis Khan, or those who impregnate as many women as possible. The winners would be bacteria that reproduce in great numbers. The winners would be some animals who have hundreds of offspring. But most likely BG has 2 to 5 children. So, by his own standards, he is a very lousy reproductor. There is no success in nature. There is no success in nature. Success is a man-made concept that has been projected onto biology. Saying that an animal or a species succeeds is mistakenly anthropomorphizing nature. This is a clear equivocation on the term success. The term evolutionary success has a very particular and technical meaning. It is used merely to point to the spread of some population in an environment. This has nothing to do with what we mean by success in any other context. In BG's argument, actions that do not ultimately lead to reproduction are bad. Such acts are described pejoratively as spinning the wheels, masturbation, fake actions, etc. BG clearly places negative value on actions that are not directed at reproduction. It is clear that he wants to do that from the perspective of evolution. However, there is no failure or success in evolution. There are just animals living in their ecosystems. Evolution is the change in the frequency of alleles in a given population. There is no success or failure in the change of the genetic makeup. It's just that, change. It is impossible to make such value judgments because evolutionary process does not have any inherent value. The only values there are the values that animals put on things, objects, environment, other animals, behaviors, etc. We could project some value on nature, for example by saying that it's bad when a beautiful bird goes extinct, or that it's bad when a pest spreads in the ecosystem. But these are our own values, not that of evolution. Here, we're challenging the premise of the argument by pointing out that the framework of evolution itself does not provide a basis for assigning any evaluative judgments. We emphasize that the concept of success or failure is more applicable to human subjective perspectives and societal norms rather than to the process of evolution. This is done by shedding light on the distinction between scientific descriptions of evolution and subjective value judgments. There is no purpose in evolution. The biggest error BG makes is at the very foundation of his entire argument. He thinks that our actions serve the purpose of reproduction because he wrongly believes that evolution has built animals with a purpose, the purpose to reproduce. This is a complete misunderstanding of evolution. Evolution is not a purpose-driven process. Quite the contrary. The genius idea behind evolution through natural selection is that there are no goals, there is no design, no plan, no purpose. New forms of life constantly appear all without these things. Natural selection has no purpose and gives no purpose to its products, organisms. Species, too, have no transcendent purpose. This is the beauty of the theory of evolution. which BG fails to grasp. The crucial conclusion is this: if there is no purpose in evolution, then there is no goal we could fail to achieve on the evolutionary ground, and there are no winners nor losers. Purpose of life through parenting is just a story. Many parents believe that being a parent is one of the most important aspects of who they are. People cannot handle the utter meaninglessness of the universe and of themselves, so they seek some purpose or meaning in parenthood. This delusion of meaning is usually taken for granted, left unexamined. Here we see that BG is providing a grand story about some natural purpose, about being what you are, and about the only source of value. What for? It's not the truth. It's just a story, a delusion, if you will. But this sense of meaning of life that parents derive from having children is just a feeling, not an objective or transcendent purpose of life that undergirds biology. On value. According to BG, there is no other source of value in the universe other than reproduction. Only reproduction can create value out of causality, because reproduction is self-propelling. The cause and the effect are in a circle, and that's what value is, when the effect becomes the cause. This is such a weird conception of value. BG tries to win the argument by redefining basic terms. The term value can be understood morally, ethically, aesthetically, economically, etc. But this, the effect becoming the cause of the same type of effect, this is not value, this is just reproduction. Ideas on who we are. Saying that we are just tubes with ganglia synchronizing muscle twitches for feeding and reproduction is, of course, reductive. It's easy to assail this point. There are a myriad of ways we can think of ourselves. I'll briefly mention 3 of them. We can look at our physical or chemical makeup, we can look at our powers of abstract thought, and we can look at ourselves as self-maintaining systems. Physics and chemistry. We can go down the complexity scale. We can easily show the simplicity of the human body by considering its relatively simple chemical composition. We can say a human body is just a composition of these proportions of such and such chemicals. Why shouldn't we say we're just a chemical soup? Similarly, we can take a perspective not from biology or chemistry, but from physics. We could describe a human organism through physical laws. Why shouldn't we say we're just organizations of atoms following specific laws of physics? We are general-purpose thinking machines. BG ignores one important point about the evolution of Homo sapiens, which is the fact that we have evolved a complex brain which acts as a general-purpose thinking organ. We think not only about immediate things to satisfy our desires, but we can also think about abstract things like mathematics, space travel, culture, civilization, rationality, logic, ethics. We are no longer constrained to having a rigid thinking patterns in our mental toolbox. We have a general-purpose mind with which we can create new thinking tools. We can think about ourselves for our own sakes. Autopoietic systems. Some of the best ideas on what life is and what we are based on the concept of autopoiesis. An autopoietic system is a system that maintains itself. It gathers energy and resources to build and replace its components, to repair those that break, to clean up, to act, etc. An autopoietic system is one that does not disintegrate but actively propels itself into the future. It struggles against entropy and the environment. Of note is the fact that this conceptualization of living systems doesn't invoke the notion of reproduction. It's for a very good reason. Most life does not reproduce. but all life is a self-maintaining system. We're not just one thing. What the various ideas on what we are show is that it's perfectly legitimate to conceptualize what we are in very different ways. Humans, being reproducing machines, is just one of many ways we think of living beings. It's not a privileged position, not in science, not in philosophy. We can, and we do, in fact, look at ourselves and at life in general from different perspectives. We can rebel. A slave can rebel being a slave. We may be slaves to the passions, especially the passion for sex, but we can rebel. We can hack our own evolved system of desire, trick it into thinking that we are doing its bidding, that we are slaving away, while in reality we live by our own standards. We can live for ourselves, rather than only for that particular part of ourselves. Nature is not your friend. Nature, through your cravings, pushes you into doing various things, but they are not necessarily good for you or for others. Why shouldn't we rebel and take responsibility for ourselves? Will nature get mad? Even if she does, so what? The "so what" objection. The overarching point is this: all that you do is motivated by desires that evolved to make you reproduce. The obvious question is, of course, so what? For the sake of the argument, let's assume that only reproduction is the source of value. Nothing else we do has any value. He who does not reproduce has no value. Okay, so what? Why would I care for this value in the reproductive sense? I could still be doing my things, completely ignoring the only value there is. I don't see a problem with that. There is nothing there that puts any obligation or requirement on me to act in line with that alleged reproductive purpose. I simply choose to act otherwise, not caring about the ultimate purpose of life, and that my life has no value according to some interpretation of evolution. Why would I care about some externally imposed meaning that has not been rationally justified to me? I don't. How can we say that the world is terrible? What is the ground of saying the world is horrible? BG says that this is only a lie, that we have souls and that there is genuine kindness and love. But a pessimist doesn't have to believe in souls or genuine kindness. Not at all. BG says that the pessimist evaluates the world from the perspective of some ideal world, takes the ideal as the standard, and then says that the world should be like this imagined utopia. This need not be the case. The pessimist doesn't need to use any shoulds, but instead he can simply evaluate the world from the perspective of sentient beings, or how the world is for these creatures. Moreover, what would even be the motivation for imagining such an ideal world? If I had not judged the world as bad, why would I think of a better one? That's the thing. I first have to condemn the world to get a motive to construe something that would not be so bad. Conclusion. BlitheringGenius puts a bold claim that reproduction is the sole purpose and value in life. A closer look reveals major cracks in the foundation of his argument. Firstly, his argument hinges on redefining core concepts like value to fit his narrative. Secondly, there is no success in evolution in the way we normally understand it. Thirdly, there is no purpose in life, or at the very least, one cannot be gleaned from theory of evolution, since it's a totally blind process. And finally, humans possess a remarkable capacity for complex thought and self-awareness, allowing us to transcend our primal urges and become what we want to be. So, While our biology plays a role, it doesn't set out a purpose for us. We have the agency to forge our own meaning. We can choose to hack our desires, pursuing goals that resonate with us. Finding fulfillment in creativity, knowledge, or simply living a life true to ourselves is completely fine, and there is no God of evolution who would condemn us for our sins of not procreating. We are much more than just reproducing machines. It's just a biological function. It's not our purpose. It's not a measure of our value. We have the freedom to explore, create, and forge our own path, defining values and meaning on our own terms. After all, the most valuable experiences might be the ones we create ourselves.